I took some notes, actually.
Scrib.
With each passing day, Supergiant Games centrally drags me farther down their beautiful rabbit hole of unique and stimulating adventure. Pyre's no different, catching me completely off guard and reteaching me what games can be if we allow them to stretch into familiar but unexplored territory. Maybe it's video games that are the final frontier, and not space. Supergiant's first two games are some of my favorite of the past decade, so of course Pyre's been on my radar ever since we first heard of it. The averaged out score that we found for the game online is a 90 out of 100 points, so we're gonna see if that's too high of a score, too low of a score, or somewhere in between. We're gonna review it in the same format as we always do, ranking the different parts of the game from the worst to the best, and then give our own overall score of it at the end. Alright, let's do this. In last place is the story. After being exiled into the downside wastelands, a crew of travelers seeking a second chance at life fight for their freedom in an ancient competition that will let one among them walk free after proving victorious. Pyre hits on all the right emotional notes to burrow its way into your heart. Revolution, redemption, friendship, it's all there. But, let me just put these eye drops in real quick, they're kinda dry. From reading so much. The story's honestly way too interesting to relegate so many interesting details to pages in a book that a lot of people will just end up kinda skimming over or skipping entirely. But I came up with a small counter-argument to that. And yes, I argue with myself. Everyone laugh at the stupid idiot who argues about video games with himself. But something about the opaque storytelling relays a certain reverence to the game's goings-on. Vague descriptions of mystical objects and the powers that be shroud the game in a solemn mystery. Like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but I can tell that it's historically and even probably religiously important, and revealing too much of it would have killed the illusion. You're gonna get the main gist of the story even if you never open up the mysterious book at all, but you'd miss out on what I think are the most interesting bits of what's going on in the game. The end of the game is a swell of bittersweet emotion that makes following the story as close as you can worth it. But by then, the story had pretty much stagnated after having basically the same moment happen over and over again. And while the ending did give a good sense of closure, it felt really lackluster the way it was presented. I felt like I wasn't really rewarded for beating the game with a cool ending sequence. It was just kind of inconcretely delivered. The world is bursting with so much vibrant life and lore that I just wish the cover was pulled back a little bit more so we could see all of it. But I felt like I was kept at an arm's distance so I couldn't fully immerse myself. The game's story friend-zoned me, basically. In fourth place is the gameplay. Pyre's unlike anything I've ever played before, and mostly in pretty good ways. But the trick with trying to innovate is that there are bound to be parts of your game that aren't done quite perfectly because you're kind of working in territory that has no precedent. The main culprit here is repetitiveness. No matter how fun a game is, it gets a little stale if things don't get shaken up every once in a while. And Pyre showed flashes of doing that with some cool minigame type events, which I thought were a really good idea, but especially by the end of the game it becomes a copy-paste of the same cycle of events a few too many times in a row. Cool events, but still. The actual Pyre competitions, which are the staple of the gameplay experience, are pretty fun, but I never quite figured out any profound strategy behind them. Mostly things just kinda ended up working for reasons I'm a little too dumb to grasp, so I relied on using the same characters and moves most of the time. But since the games were tied so meaningfully into the story and the stakes were so high during the most important ones, the tension makes the Pyre matches a ton more fun than they normally would have been. Leveling up the characters through the matches shakes things up a bit too, because they all get new skills and stuff to try out for the next time around. You can't really fault Supergiant for trying something cool and new, and it's pretty impressive that they make it work as well as it does. And really it's that same innovation that made me give it the slight edge over the story. Third place goes to the characters. For reasons I can't get into without spoiling too much stuff, it's important to grow close to the party as you travel the wastelands with them. And almost without exception I did, and even a lot of the rival team's members grew on me too. Everyone has great distinctive personalities in a fun kind of way. Like, I haven't met these kinds of people ever, but I can imagine that they exist in some weird foreign place I've never been to. Although I have to say at first I was kinda let down by the cast of characters because everyone seems to just come together without much fanfare and kind of abruptly. But as time goes on, you get a glimpse into why they were banished into the downside in the first place, what they want out of life, and what they would do with a second chance if they got it. Most of the visual novel aspect of the game is used to further character development, which made for some nice one-on-one time with each of them. I do wish that there were some more moments of the team coming together for a big heart-to-heart. One of my absolute favorite things in games is when all the teammates become friends, and not just with the main character. It brings the conflict a new sense of importance when not only I care about everyone involved, but all the characters care about everybody involved too. Leaving it to small lines of retrospective thoughts and feelings for each other just didn't really feel like the best way to show how tight they all got as they traveled the downside together. Pyre's soundtrack is the perfect supporting player, making everything around it so much better than it would have been without it. 99.9% of the music delivers exactly what I wanted, and way more, so it feels kind of unfair of me to demand absolute perfection. But you made your own perfect little bed, Darren, now you have to sleep in it. My one tiny issue with the soundtrack is that on just a couple of occasions, I think it hid in the background a little bit too much for its own good. My body would get all ready for one of the songs to take over a scene, but it's like one last layer of the song forgets to come out and leaves me grasping through the air for
pure audio domination.
The audio engineering of the game is super cool too. It does this thing where it seamlessly blends into the player's actions, so it always starts and ends right when it's appropriate. There aren't any awkward audio transitions. It's like every scene ends in a sonically satisfying and conclusive way, and it gets the stage set nicely for whatever happens next. Since the game is so steeped in religious rites and lore, a lot of the music has that sort of longing, regretful feel, the penitent kind of sound you expect when things get down and heavy on an existential level, but with a bunch of instrumental flourishes and bumping percussion that get the blood moving right along with it. The best track in the game is this dirty bass-thumping church pipe organ track called The Old Ways that feels like the hand of the gods are ready to pass some judgment on some fools. I love the music in this game so much. This is Darren Korb's best work to date, and worth listening to regardless of whether you ever play the game or not. I honestly didn't think the day would come when Darren Korb's music would be dethroned by some other part of a Supergiant game, but the visuals of Pyre captivated me from when I first saw the images of it until the very end. Friendship ended with Darren Korb. There's a depth behind Pyre's beauty, and I think I finally put my finger on just a bit of the reason how. Like the paneled stained glass effect, which is so good for this game. Usually stained glass is seen in cathedrals and churches and stuff, used as a sort of single-page picture book that captures past events in a vibrant splash of color. This is the idea I alluded to earlier in the review, that the story isn't fully divulged on purpose, and that the mysterious and sacred story being told in Pyre is only meant to come to us in more vague terms, and the rest of it is left to us to infer and interpret for ourselves. Like this is a bedtime story, and some of the finer details have been forgotten, but the magic and the myth remain, and that's enough to keep the story being told to kids at night. The semi-brush-stroked character designs kind of play into the same idea too. They all have really cool and detailed designs, but it feels like we're looking more at their portraits than their actual likeness, and it gives off the impression that maybe this all happened a long time ago, and only sparse bits of information is all that's been left behind. To be kinda honest, I almost think the art direction is so good that it does the game a disservice. The downside's supposed to be this terrible place where exiles are sent to live out a gross lifelong punishment for their crimes, but it kinda looked like a place I'd like to go visit. Pyre was a bit of a slow burn for me, taking me a bit longer to get into than some other games, but by the end I was glad to have taken the journey, rocky though the path might have been. There are a lot of areas that the game could have been better in, but there are just as many that, honestly, I don't think could have been improved no matter how much money, time, or manpower they threw at it. I continue to be blown away at how such a small studio can put out such ambitious and creative games. And while I'm more than happy with what they've given us so far, I know that Supergiant has another level that they can take themselves to in terms of making complete and awesome games. I say this completely out of love. I'm just excited to see where they can go from here. Our final score for the game came out to be a 79 out of 100, which is quite a bit lower than the average score that we found that it got everywhere else online. So we have to say that Pyre is pretty much overrated. Hey, thanks for watching everyone. Tell us how you'd rank the different parts of the game or the game overall. We'd like to know. Also, you can follow us on Twitch and talk with us more about it or anything else that you want to. And as always, feel free to suggest games that you think we should cover in the future. See you next time. Hey, look who's back. He doesn't have any lines.